Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and thanks for joining me today. Today the project we're working on is doing a couple of Casio hydro mods. And so what you see me working on here is a G-Shock DW5600. And we're going to start by taking the bracelet off and taking the shroud off the case. And so you just unscrew these screws on the side and take this whole shroud off because we're going to be submerging this whole thing in oil. So now that we've got the shroud off and we've got the bare case, that's all there is to it. And now the oil we're going to be using is called, I got this on Amazon, I believe, for $8 or $9. It's called Micro Lubrol Type 200 Fluid Silicone Oil. And it says 100% silicone oil, 50 CST viscosity. And so from all my very little research, the 50 CST viscosity seemed important, and then it's got to be silicone oil because it's non-conductive. So I'm going to pour it in this little tray, and this is actually a little container that watch parts have come from AliExpress. They ship them in these little plastic containers, and they're great. I hang on to them because they're super useful for all sorts of stuff. So we're going to take the case back off, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the module out, and this is pretty straightforward. Take that little plastic cover off. I take the spring out and take this module out, just gently kind of pry it up with some tweezers. If you've got something that non-marking, with plastic tips or something like that, that's what I use for all my watch stuff. And so we'll pull the module out, and then I'm going to submerge everything in the oil and kind of let it sit and soak for a minute or two, and hopefully let the oil kind of get into all the crevices and let the oil, let all the air bubbles come out. So then what I do is I take this syringe, and I'm going to use this a bunch in this process. And so I'll suck up this the silicone oil and squirt it into the case and fill that whole case up. Then I'll let the movement kind of sit in the oil. And eventually what I'll do is I'll use that syringe and kind of force the oil into the movement in any of the crevices and like in the gaps. And what I'm doing is trying to push all the air bubbles out. And so I'm kind of, forcing the oil in and forcing it as deep as it can go so that it takes up all the space and pushes out all the oil. So that's again what I'm doing here. Put the movement in the case, or the module in the case rather, and then just use the syringe to just continually just force oil in, and it's kind of goes in and flows out of the case. You can kind of see it like flowing over the top. And again, we're just trying to force all the air bubbles out as best we can. So I just keep doing this for a little bit. This process took me a few minutes. So then what we're going to do is put the case back on, and got to put the little gasket in place, and we're going to put the case back on. Make sure you put this little rubber cover back on, put your little spring in, and so that the watch is all ready to go back together. I chose to fill this little container with some more oil so that the whole thing's got to be submerged. And when the case back's on there, it's kind of hard to tell, but the case back has got a little, it's got some space to it, and so you got to fill that space with oil, otherwise you're going to get air bubbles. And so what I did is I put the case back on, and then again just use the syringe to just force oil through there to push out all the air. And so when everything's submerged and you can force the air out, then your bubbles aren't going to form back in there if you get all the air out. And so I was struggling a little bit with this process and trying to get the gasket right and get everything perfect. And see here, it's a little bit of a struggle. So just keep finagling it, keep squirting oil in there to fill all the space. And if you have any air bubbles, it's going to ruin the whole thing. So you have to make sure that all the air is out. It's completely devoid of any bubbles or anything. And this will also help get any any maybe fuzz or lint or dust out of there as well, hopefully. So I put the case back on here, screw it all down. Again, the whole thing is submerged at this point. And so we screw the case back on, and then what I'll do is I'll pull it out, and I'm just going to check everything. Once I get all these screws in here, all right, so now we're going to take the whole case and module out. I'm going to wipe it down just so that it's kind of clean and not dripping anywhere. You can see this makes a mess. It is a messy process. So then I want to flip it so that the dial or the screen is up. And what you see here are little tiny air bubbles. And so I didn't do a good enough job, getting all those out of there, unfortunately. So this is the byproduct of that. So we're going to take the whole thing back apart, and we're just going to repeat this process. So, we just want to take everything apart and get all the air out of there. It's just so important, because if you get one little bubble in there, what happens is, the screen of your watch is what faces up, and that bubble's going to rise to the top, and it's just going to float back and forth. And, I guess depending on what you're going for, that might look kind of cool. But I think most people would say that drive you nuts. And so take the whole thing apart, and we're going to do our best again to get every little bit of air out of this. That's like the most important step, is to just get all the air out. So again, just using the syringe to just force the oil into every crevice, and it worked in the end. So spoiler alert, eventually we get all the air out. So once I'm kind of satisfied that I think I've done the best I can. And I think as much air is out of there as I can possibly get. We're going to start putting it back together again. And what's maybe the most frustrating part about this process is there's no way to check it. If you flip it over without putting the case back on, all the oil is going to run out and it's not going to matter. So there's no real way to check the watch. Even if you were to hold it up over your head and look at it from underneath, you wouldn't see the air bubbles because those are going to be obviously, they're going to rise. And so you're looking at the bottom of it and you're just not going to see those. So it was tough because you just have to do the best you can and then put it all together and then check it. And if you didn't do it, you got to start it all over again. So here I'll add some more oil again, just making sure that the whole thing is submerged so that when I put that case back on, I can fill that void underneath the lip of the case back. And ultimately what I ended up doing is I think I put in one of the case back screws and tightened it like partially down. And then it was kind of in place and I was able to lift up a corner and again, squirt the oil through there and kind of push it through there again. And that definitely seemed to be the way to do it. And it worked on the next one I did as well. All right, so everything's back together. Now we just got to take a look again and see how it came out. So wipe it off, take a look, and everything worked out. But what you do want to do is make sure you turn and maneuver that whole thing a bunch of different angles so that if there is an air bubble trapped in there, that it frees up and floats to the screen where you can see it, so you'll know that air bubble is in there. The last thing you want to do is find out, a couple of days or a week later that there's an air bubble in there that you didn't see. That'd be really frustrating. So what I did is I took the whole thing, I washed it really thoroughly with dish soap and water to get all the oil off the outside and put it back together. So here you can see the final product and it came out really fantastic. I'll have some more images of that. Next, we're going to do the same exact thing to a Casio AE1200 world timer, and to save you a little bit of hassle or save you some time, I've already got this taken apart. You can see those little colored pieces of film there on the right. Those were in the little screens. I had this watch, I just put some like color filament in there, or color filters. So anyway, start the whole process over again. Squirt the oil, try to suck any air bubbles out. Now, one thing I did notice when I'm sucking up the oil in the syringe is that you want to be gentle, because if you suck up and you either pull it above the surface of the oil or you do it too aggressively, you'll suck up air bubbles. And then you're just going to be squirting air bubbles into the whole thing, which is what you're trying not to do. So be careful to not get any air bubbles trapped in there. And also just be careful with when you're squirting that oil in there that you're doing it kind of gently, because you don't want to just spray it everywhere. It will kind of go all over the place, as you see by the paper towel. So again, you just want to be careful when you're sucking up the oil in the syringe, not to get any air bubbles in there. And right here, you see I get an air bubble, and I try to let it float to the top and get it out, and do it a little bit too aggressively and make a mess. So be careful with that. The other thing you could try is, I've seen some kind of blunt needle type tips you could put on these syringes that are maybe a little bit more delicate and allow you to kind of get that oil exactly in there where you want it. So that's always an option, as long as it's not an actual sharp needle. You just want to be careful with that, obviously. So add some more oil to make sure that this little tray is completely filled and that the whole thing is submerged in the oil. That's a huge factor. If it's not submerged, you're not going to be able to get it totally filled with oil, no matter how hard you try, I promise. So now again, ready to put this whole thing back together. Once you feel like you've done a good enough job and you got all the air bubbles out. So I'll put this gasket in place. This one gave me some problems because when you put the case back on, it wanted to move around. And I think when you put the case back on and squeeze it down, like it moves the oil around, obviously. And so, this one just took me a couple of tries to get it back together. So once you got the gasket in place and you're satisfied, once again, you're going to put this case back on. And again, we're going to suck some oil up and try to push it in there. These cases will hold an air bubble in there, even if it's very slight, because they're kind of concave in order for the module to seat into that case. So you want to make sure that you get that totally filled. Yeah, we're going to add some more oil again. You just have to make sure it's totally submerged. You're going to use more oil than you probably think, and that's okay. You can always pour it back into the bottle. That's exactly what I did. There's nothing wrong with that. So you see, when I pulled the case back off, the gasket wanted to come with it, and so just make sure you're being careful. Make sure you're getting everything in place, because if that gasket's not in place, then I promise you that oil is going to leak out as well. So same thing as that gasket makes the whole case water resistant, it's going to hold that oil in as well. So you want to make sure everything is in place and that everything's nice and tight. All right, so now I think that I'm pretty satisfied with everything, and everything seems to be in place. And so we're gonna put the whole thing back together again. It can be a little tricky because now everything's covered in oil and everything's a little slippery, and it's also submerged under the oil. So that's a factor you have to consider in putting this all back together. So I'll screw the case back on here. And what I like to do is put all the screws in place, get them kind of snuggish, and then go one by one and tighten them all the way down. All right, so I'm happy with my work. I'm satisfied I got all the air bubbles out. We're going to put it back together. We'll pull it out, wipe it off, and we're going to, once again, just wash the whole thing with soap and water and get all the oil off the outside. So here it is put back together, and you can just see how black and how rich that bezel looks. It looks so dark and so clean. And it's really hard to do this justice on camera to see really how good this display looks after doing this mod. And so you're almost going to have to see one in person to really know, but hopefully it's coming through on the camera and you guys get an idea of what this looks like and how much better it looks, because it really, in my opinion, looks way better. So here it is side by side with just a straight from the factory AE1200 on the left, and you can see the difference in the bezel colors there, and you can see the difference in the clarity of the dials, or sorry, not the dials, the screen. You know, and in my opinion, it's much more legible, it's much richer, it's much darker. It just looks overall totally better. It is a subtle difference, but it is definitely there, and I do think the Hydra mod looks much better. All right, so how does that backlight look? It looks great. It's still very legible, easy to read, lights up the whole thing. Doesn't really cause any problems with the backlight there. No issues. All right, now the AE1200 backlight looks great. No issues there. Lights up the whole screen. Sorry, the camera's just having a hard time staying focused in here, but it looks fantastic. All right, so here they are out in the sunlight in the daytime, and they look phenomenal. You can just see how dark and rich those look. They're nice and clear, very legible. I'm super happy with how this turned out. You know, you can definitely read them from a more of an angle. It's not perfect, but it never will be. So the whole thing cost me probably about $8 or $9, and each one took me probably 15 minutes. Your mileage may vary, but overall I'm very happy with it. It's definitely worth it. I'll probably be doing this again to more watches, but we'll see. Thanks again for watching, guys, and if you liked this video or found it informational, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. That'd be wonderful. Thanks again.